Driving a racing car demands a full measure of skill and courage. To be a successful racing driver, to be counted among the handful of men who in each generation have won the great races, that requires a special quality, the right stuff. The right stuff is hard to define, but it calls for one vital ingredient.
If I didn't think I was in a position to win, I'd have retired.
My whole philosophy is I want to go out and try and win because I'm a racer. I want to race.
If you're not there to win, I don't see how you can justify even being there.
In motor racing, I'm sure that none of the drivers today even sort of stand back and say, oh, I'm sorry, after you. That's not why to win races.
This business of talking about being a good loser, I mean, what's the point? A good loser is someone who hasn't got any alternative.
I, for one, believe that there is a common denominator deep inside most racing drivers that might have something to do with that one essential, and that is a need to win.
Today, the rewards for winning are staggering. The top drivers in Formula One will earn £5 to £6 million in a season. Fame and riches are powerful incentives. So there are plenty of young drivers keen to see if they have the right stuff to win. For some, the long road to the top starts at a racing school.
I'm Joseph Haig. I come from Sydney, Australia. I'm 24 years old. I'm a real estate agent. I've had a little bit of karting experience, and that's about it.
Good afternoon from sunny Jersey. My name is Paul Duran. I'm a hotelier in Jersey, 36 years old and still young. No official motor racing.
Good afternoon. My name is Seong Jo from Korea.
Good. And you haven't done any racing before, Seong? No? Well, there you go. Nothing if not varied, I think you'll agree. Let me start by saying this, that if anybody expects to call themselves racing driver 1 week from today, now is as good a time as any to pack your bags and go home.
The first thing to get used to is the racing car itself, so unlike a road car. It's frighteningly close to the ground. Its controls respond to the slightest touch, and of course, it's bursting with power. The students have a week to get used to it. By then, they'll be racing each other and cornering at over 70 miles an hour.
But once you've got used to driving the car, you might find you want it altering anyway. And we'll have a play about later in the week. If you've got any problems, just let us know. Okay.
The old saying is you drive a motor car through the seat of your pants, and I think that's quite true. You do really get most of the feel from a motor car from sitting in the seat. And you become part of it. You're sitting in the car, it's all tailor-made, fits you, and it's like wearing a shoe.
Keep your arm relaxed, bent in the middle. Hold the lever in the palm of your hand and just throw your wrist. And if you miss the gear, you have to rev it again. Okay, so it's one rev of the engine for every time you go for a gear.
Engine neutral, rev the engine, into third, out with the clutch.
You cannot expect to climb into a strange car and be immediately comfortable in that car. You cannot possibly plan to drive at what we would refer to as 10/10ths, or the total limit of your ability.
Hey, that's gear. Yeah. Rev.
Even a would-be champion must start with the basics. In the first lesson, these students rarely get out of third gear. At the end of the week, they'll be tested in a 10-lap race, and those who complete it will get that first coveted signature on their racing license.
Naturals in this business, those people who can climb into a car and immediately go quickly, are very few and far between. The sort of people I'm thinking of, I suppose, are the Jimmy Clarks, the Stewarts, I suppose the Sennas and the Prosts, and they are the exception. Much more the rule are the Mansells and the Bergers and the Mosses and the Lauders and the Hunts. And they have to work at their driving. They are not naturals. In working at the driving, they can be just as successful as their natural colleagues. But it takes hard work.
I've never really known whether I was a born driver or made. I think a bit of each. I think I perhaps was not as much of a born driver as Jimmy Clark. I think I certainly was more of a born driver than Graham. Graham, I think, made himself into what he is by sheer hard work, bravery, guts, call it what you will, in the same way as I think Nigel Mansell did the same thing. I think that I certainly had a certain amount of born instinct in it because I have a feeling with a car, an empathy with a car.
Many people that say, well, you know, this guy was born with a steering wheel in his hands and so on and so forth. I've never seen that. I've never seen a baby come out with a steering wheel in his hand. So it doesn't happen. You cultivate it. Why? You cultivate that because you have that desire to want to win.
Hasta cierto punto todos somos iguales.
Up to a certain point, we're all the same. Differences do exist. It's the small tenths that make, let's say, one driver stand out from another. To be a top-line driver, you must realize that you can do something more than the rest.
We're going to line you all up behind an instructor in one of the Astras, and he's going to lead you around in a group of, say, 4 or 5. And each of you will get 4 laps immediately behind the lead car. And that way, you'll learn the circuit.
Primarily you're managing your car, and primarily you're trying to get the best possible line and get the car on its tippy toes and balance to the nth degree to go around the whole lap as fast as you can, because that's the name of the game, being as quick as you can.
You never abuse a car and jerk it or anything like that. That is not what one does. When one goes into a corner, you coax it into a corner. All right, quite often you go further than it wants to go, and that makes the thing do something. But in principle, you're not jolty with a car. You must never sort of make it jump. It's like being with an animal. You don't want to make it jump. That's not the idea. The whole thing is that it's you with you, and it should all be a gentle flow with what you're doing and the vehicle. Normally you'd brake, I was always told, you brake on the straight going into the corner, you accelerate round, and you go out. And overall, that is the simple and best way of doing it. But if you are able to learn how to use your braking to position the car, then you can go into a corner and actually turn in and brake at the same time.
One great natural racing driver was Jim Clark. He was Formula One world champion twice in the 1960s. Whatever he was driving, a Grand Prix car or a Lotus Cortina, he was always at 10 tenths. Few drivers could equal his accuracy in cornering at high speed. The true test of driving genius is consistency, the ability to drive at the limit for the whole of a race. Jackie Stewart had it and won 3 world championships. He was discovered by the racing team owner, Ken Tyrrell.
His ability to lap a circuit consistently fast was quite exceptional. I've known him on a number of occasions do 5 consecutive laps in practice or testing of exactly the same lap time. And this is a talent which is not easy to find.
So we're going down this wooded section, this funnel almost in the forest. You're going round in 4th gear, very, very quick indeed. Here you see yourself going through what is really a cutting in a heavily valleyed area with trees. Now, can you think of going down here at 175 where the car bottoms out and it grunches the suspension, the chassis really gets gouged. You're going up here with so much G-forces on that you can't take your foot off the throttle and get it onto the brake. You're approaching the famous carousel, and if you look forward, you see the high fir tree. Now, we aim the car at that high fir tree, and if I put this car on the line for the fir tree, I go exactly into the bowl of the carousel. And there you are, into this bowl. It's a second gear corner. You're accelerating round this corner. Out you come. The car lifts itself out the bowl. If you come out too early, the car will just fly straight over to the barrier.
The guy that thinks he is a good driver is a danger to himself and to everybody else. We're all in the business of learning. It may very well be that there is someone who looks perfectly safe at, say, 60 miles through a given corner, and the other chap who at 40 miles an hour looks like an accident waiting to happen.
Whatever the skill of the driver, deadly danger is an inescapable part of the job. The right stuff is never more needed than in the face of death or injury.
First thing you do need is great confidence in yourself. This is essential, because if a driver gets hurt or killed or something, you have to know that it wouldn't, it wouldn't have happened to you. It's beneficial if you have great confidence in the car. I, unfortunately, in my career, had 7 brake failures. I've had 8 wheels come off, twice the steering shear, and that does undermine one's feeling of confidence that the car's strong enough. I had wishbones break, I've had the Dion tubes break, and therefore, obviously, that does lessen your confidence.
A crash can hurt more than the body. In 1962, Stirling Moss was driving a Lotus at Goodwood and inexplicably crashed into the bank on the outside of a bend. He was critically injured. It was a month before he was fully conscious and many more before he drove again. And then he realized that something about him had changed.
All the things that I had taken for granted had gone, and because of that there just was insufficient left to carry on in a life that was so important to me and so demanding, and it just meant that I just couldn't do it.
It's much safer today than it was when I was driving around circuits with telegraph posts and straw bales and all sorts of obstacles around the circuit that you couldn't afford to have an accident. But at the same time, the car itself improved from a construction point of view, a crash-worthy point of view, fire-resistant, the fuel safety tanks, etc., all making today's motor cars very, very safe.
Yes, safety standards have gone up, the cars are built much stronger and better, and the circuits have changed their design to sort of help in case of a suspension failure or something like that. But what I would say to you is that there's been quite a lot of accidents of late where I would say, just in one word, the good Lord up there has been looking after people, because an awful lot of people have walked away from some very serious accidents which they shouldn't have done.
But it's a brutal reality of the sport. Sometimes drivers do not walk away from their crashes, whatever anyone does to save them.
You have to feel that something justifies that risk. And I think the satisfaction that I derive from winning justifies the risk. That's how, you know, that's how I live with it.
As I came off the accelerator, yeah, to go for the brake, straight on. So.
2 laps into the session, we had a fellow lock up the brakes and do absolutely nothing about it. He slid straight on and stopped at my feet. Now, he was there the whole session. That's a pretty clear message. It's slippery. That's inexcusable. You're just not thinking about the basics.
We've got damaged cars now, see the under tray dragging along the floor. I mean, it's, you know, it's so time-consuming. We had to pull you out of the car just to talk to you because you're just not driving well at all. You're just not thinking. You got to feel what's happening out there. You know, the roads are slippery. You're not racing against each other, yeah? We are practicing. This is lapping. This is for you to learn how to drive the car safely around the circuit. And if you're going to start racing each other again, I'm going to stop the session. I'm going to pull you out of the car and you won't finish the session. That's all there is to it. You got to keep on the black stuff, especially when it's wet.
A slippery surface is a problem for all, but an opportunity for the brilliant few.
I like a lot to drive in the rain. Of course, on the other side it's dangerous, but put you a little bit away from driving in the rain. On the other side is fun because you can put all your natural talent in driving because it's all reaction, reflex, and that's nice. If you have 2 or 3 cars in front of you and you're just 2 or 3 meters behind, you don't see anything. So you just listen to the noise. You even don't see the car, you even don't see the circuit, you don't see the corner. And then you hear if the car in front of you back off, so you know the corner is coming and you do the same, but that's sometimes very difficult.
I mean, I had a name for liking the wet, and therefore I tried to use that to my advantage. So if people say, oh God, it's a wet day, mustn't like this, then immediately that gives me a half a second. It has to.
He was amazing in the wet. And I can remember seeing the car, you know, and it would be all on opposite lock, and you'd think, God, he's having a hell of a time. And he did this deliberately. He told me afterwards he'd get off. Invariably, he'd be on the front row of the grid anyway, so he'd get off. And he'd be out in the clear. He wasn't having to drive through a fog of rain. And he would deliberately make the car sort of skitter all over the road so that the people behind, like me, would think, God, if Moss is having that much trouble with it, you know, I'd better back off a bit. So this was one of his little skills.
It's hard for an onlooker to realise what an intense physical strain it is to drive a racing car.
We're doing about 165, 170 miles an hour now, into fifth, 180, 185 miles an hour. Now hard on the brakes, down to second gear, 70 miles an hour now for this right-hand corner. A combination of enormously wide tyres and a lot of aerodynamic downforce from the rear wing, and the venturi underneath the car gives these phenomenal levels of grip. Indeed, the cornering forces in G terms are about 3 times as high as the best road car, 3G compared to 1.
On a tight, twisty course, you end up being strapped into the car by your torso and flung around rather as a rag doll would be if it was strapped in the back of a shoebox, you know, with everything flapping around. And to try and, of course, maintain your legs and arms in one position, and that's, of course, vital. Changing gear, of course, bringing your hand from the steering wheel off to the gear lever and back. If your arm weighs 12 pounds or whatever at 3G, that's 36 pounds. And so it's very hard work, and a lot of fitness is required coping with those sort of G-forces.
The drivers are driving missiles today because the cornering speeds and lateral G that the drivers are putting up with is quite phenomenal.
There's nothing to do against G-force. Sometimes you can
put a strap, you know, below your shoulder. You just hold it to your helmet. Then in this case, you don't go too far, because what happens is the muscles of the neck, you know, are very strong. You can see my neck is very big, but I've never done any exercise for the neck. It's only racing, you know. And what happens is after a few laps, the muscles are not strong enough, and your head goes far and far, you know, and then you destroy completely and you can't drive anymore. That happens very, very often.
I respect very much what a Grand Prix driver does at the cockpit. I know that whilst they can be a little awkward as people outside of the cockpit, they are very special when they're driving. If you ever sat in a Grand Prix car, you'll find there's almost no room in there, and you wonder how they can control cars. The speeds they achieve, the speeds at which they corner are just phenomenal.
It's hot. You have hot air, especially if you run in a slipstream. If you get the hot air from the car in front, if you get the hot air from the radiator, if it's hot outside, and then if you have to do the things in a cockpit, it's very, very hot. So that's hard.
It's also very, very hard, of course, for the heart as well. And from recordings that I've done and work that I've done on this, we know that the average heart rate in a major international race for a driver is about 180 beats per minute, and with even peaks of 220. And these are sort of rates and peaks that, I mean, presenting to a casualty department in such a shape would have you slapped straight into an intensive care ward. You know, it really is very, very arduous, and part of that is physical, and part of that is also emotional.
Okay, we have a few minutes, but in 5 minutes we'll be asking you to climb aboard the cars. So do what you have to do. There's a toilet just by this building, because I know how the excitement gets to you. Do that now and return here, and then we'll get you loaded up.
As the day of the big race approaches, the psychological pressures build up remorselessly.
You're in control. And then you're changing gears very late, everywhere. You're not revving out, you know, quick enough.
Try and find your way to the inside, because then you're protecting your line.
The worst tension I have is the day before the first practice, because I'm always a little bit worried, you know. I don't know what it's going to be, if I'm going to be competitive, or the track and the setup of the car and all these things. I think a little bit too much the day before the practice, and then when the race weekend start, then the pressure is about the same. It doesn't go down or up before Sunday. It's about the same.
Cool, calm, collected. Just think of him there.
Just think of Romeo.
I think drive that car. I think that's the answer, okay?
I've been accused of being rude and so on and so forth when I'm approached during this period, because you want to be alone, so you look very accessible. And a lot of people say, oh, gee, I mean, looks like he needs company. So they go there and they start small talk. Ooh, I detest that.
You have to go through a very relaxed state of mind before the race starts. You have to have a very clear mind, and then you have optimum concentration, you have 100% concentration. When I come to the paddock or to the pit, I try to concentrate mentally to calm down 3 or 4 hours before the race. I'm actually much more nervous than on the last 5 minutes. And 5 minutes or 10 minutes before the race, when I'm going to the grid, I'm very, very calm.
Yes, you may release the cars, over.
Thank you. Okay, wind them up, please. Now, some of you will just be daft enough to think, that was fun, I'm going to do that again. Some of you will be much more sensible and say, thanks, but no thanks. This is not for me. I'll find something better to do with my Saturday afternoons in future.
At any one time, there's only sort of 4 or 5 top drivers. And the others are in little groups where one's nearly the top, and others who would like to be the top but never will be, and others who just make up the race.
A racing driver better become pretty early on used to losing and able to deal with it, or he better hang up his hat, because that's what most racing drivers do most of the time, is lose. There's only one winner, lots of losers at every race.
You know that you're not going to win all the time. But what keeps you coming back? If you remember how wonderful it was the last time you were on that podium, yes, you will be working very hard to get back up there. And if you've never been on a podium yet, then you just want to be there.
Rodrigo Marqueschi, well done. If you'd like to come up and receive your trophy. Well done. Okay, well done.
Rodrigo Marqueschi, the right stuff,